Okay. All right, we're back. All right, so I was getting ready to ask you, Brother Ziyad, about your religious background or education, rather. So could you expound on that a little bit?
Well, I'm a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade and had to go to work because, I live in Omaha survived when I was growing up. We survived off of the meat packing houses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big meat distribution center, agricultural center, right?
Uh-huh.
The headquarters for a lot of the major meat packing companies. And my father worked there, and he was laid off in the 60s and so forth. At the time I was becoming a teenager, my parents split up. Anyway, I had to work. So I went to work, and but lucky enough, I guess I joined the military when I was 17. But I had to get my GED while I was in the Air Force. And so I got the GED and got, at the same time, I got a year of college credit. So I would breeze through that. But my initial education came in college education came while I was in the military. And I was going to night school. I was down in Puerto Rico at a place called Inter-American University in Omaha, Puerto Rico. And my first college class, believe it or not, was taught by a Afro-Puerto Rican professor from San Juan. And he taught Latin American history. And he was especially interested in Black Latino history. Now, this was back in the 60s, in 1966, my first college history class. And from then on, I became a sort of a history buff. I never majored in history, but I became a sort of a history buff. And my majors in undergrad was philosophy and sociology, a double major. So, political science and philosophy with a background in sociology. But my main degree was in political science. And then I did that after I got out of service. Used the GI Bill, of course, and began getting my education career set up. Next path in the education was a master's degree in criminal justice. I was among the first Black majors to get a master's degree in criminal justice when the field was separated from sociology back in 64, 65. Before 1964, 65, criminal justice was collapsed under the rubric of sociology, but it managed with the LEAA grant, the Law Enforcement Assistance Grant that was given because of the riots. And the Kerner Commission, and you're familiar with the Kerner Commission report?
I am, yes.
And with all of that, one of the recommendations was set up these criminal justice programs at various universities. University of Nebraska at Omaha was one of the first to reach out and get one of those grants. And I was one of the first Blacks to get a master's degree in criminal justice. My thesis had to do with philosophy and Marxism and the Black radical movement, of course. And political prisoners and all that kind of stuff.
The government, the GI Bill paying for it.
That's right. And oh yeah. The next step was to go to law school, and I stayed in law school about a hot year, and I had a scholarship, full ride scholarship through law school, and I stayed in law school about a hot year, and it became clear to me that I didn't want to be a lawyer. I'm not taking anything away from our Black lawyers. I think we absolutely need them, but they didn't need me. And so that I found out that law was not my bag. So then my next step was to go to divinity school. I got a scholarship to go to a Lutheran divinity school in Chicago, the University of Chicago. And it's called Lutheran School of Theology. There was about 13 universities in a consortium called the University of Chicago Cluster. And the Lutherans had their schools, and the Mormons had their schools, Quakers Presbyterian, Church of Christ, and all that. All of us had different seminaries. And there was a radical movement back then when I was going. It was 1979, 1980. So I stayed in seminary. But I found out I really didn't want to be your typical pulpit minister. I was a minister of what we call the social gospel. And at that point, I began, I was lucky enough in Chicago to join the campaign of Angela Davis.
Mm-hmm.
As she ran for vice president of the Communist Party ticket. And I began becoming interested in the Communist Party at that time. Of course, in 1981, I moved to Salt Lake City as a community organizer. And it was there in Salt Lake City I became a member of the Communist Party. And at the same time was the organizer of the Utah chapter of the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression, which is an organization that Angela Davis and others in the CP helped start, and Charlene Mitchell and others who you may or may not know of. Anyway, so there was that was back in the 1980s, and then from there I came to New York and became involved in the World Peace Movement, and I became the first disarmament coordinator, Black National Disarmament Coordinator for a major peace organization, and became a member of the Nuclear Freeze Campaign Executive Committee. And in that role, did a lot of traveling overseas to speaking tours and so forth in mainly in Western Europe and Eastern Europe. So did a lot of that. So
let me jump in again. What was the appeal for you of the Communist Party, or from the Communist Party?
Well, let's go back to Omaha again. It wasn't Malcolm X this time. It was Harry Hayward. Harry was born in South Omaha, Nebraska, and Harry Hayward was one of my favorite communist heroes. And he was the guy who was responsible for this whole idea about having the black belt thesis. That is, taking the Marcus Garvey idea and it into the whole thing about the southern states, 12 southern states, or some of the Confederate states, and turning them into a homeland or a nation within a nation, or a nation outside of a nation, a new nation for African Americans. And he pushed that idea for about 15 years. He was well known nationally for that and wrote several books on that. He's from South Omaha, so I did a lot of reading on him. There's another guy from Omaha that really caught my attention, and his name was Reverend George Washington Woodby. And he was a Black socialist minister back in the 1890s who became the first Black presidential candidate for a major political third party, but a major third party, that's the Prohibition Party. And he joined that party in 1890 and 1892.
How do you spell his last name?
Woodbey, George Washington Woodby. He was a Baptist minister in Omaha, and he wrote several books on socialism and Christianity. I found that I used to read when I was in seminary. And it occurred to me that we were talking about Latin American liberation theology. I began to get into Black American liberation theology and reading upon the Black Power movement and its effect on Black Christianity. And so I developed a whole repertoire, if you will, of understanding of how the two integrated, how Black radical Christianity integrated with Black radical politics. And that became my operating mantra, if you will, until I got to the point where I felt that I needed to dig more than just Christianity, and moved over into Islam and became an apostate to Christianity and got deep into African American Islam. That's a whole nother story. So This is a progression, you see. So,
So, okay, so we go from the Communist Party, and when did you start teaching?
I started, my first teaching class was in Omaha. It was at, here's another hookup here. Here's Reverend Leon Sullivan's operation, what do you call it?
Push.
OIC,
Yeah.
Industrialization Center.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, I got to meet Reverend, what's the man? Leon Sullivan, but it wasn't in Philly, it was in Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to Omaha a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to meet him personally.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very impressive. And the director of the Omaha OIC was one of my mentors. And he had helped me while I was at Creighton University, and helped me with my scholarship and so forth. And he asked me once I got my third year at Creighton, could I come down in the evening and help them out with their Black History curriculum?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'd be happy to. And so for a year I taught at OIC, and that was my introduction to teaching. And I got a taste for teaching Black history and Black politics through OIC. And so that was in 1971. And from then on, I've been somehow or other had my hands involved in some sort of teaching. I've taught at Boys Town. You've heard of Boys Town in Omaha. I've taught their religious education classes at Boys Town.
That's not the one from the old movie and all.
Yeah. He ain't heavy, he my brother. You know, that kind of thing. You've heard of that saying, right?
Yeah.
Your Father Flanagan's Boys Town. Yeah, that's in Omaha.
Okay.
That's in Omaha, yeah. All of that's in Omaha. Anyway, so that teaching had gotten into my system. And while I was in the Air Force, I was a trainer for, did a lot of training of troops and so forth. And you know, made my non-commissioned officer career out of training other soldiers. So I got into this whole thing about, okay, I can teach. And I learned how, you know, maybe I could do something with that. Not in the regular, maybe not in the regular ways of doing things. So then my next major teaching assignment was at Empire State College, in which I taught in New York for 2 years. And I taught courses in sociology of labor. And of course, with those courses, I also was teaching on the side, was teaching how labor hooked up with religion, and religion hooked up with labor. So always keeping the two things in tangent, the sort of class, race, religion, class, race, religion, class, race, religion. And that has helped me a lot, because I'm able to get into and talk to a lot of different kind of people on different levels, because you understand from where they're coming from. And we understand that our people were brought here, you know, originally to work. And so, and you know, we talk about ownership, we talk about capitalism and all that, but we weren't brought here to be capitalists. And if you look at the major trends and what we do, it's that work. Now, are we becoming obsolete as workers? I mean, that's a huge question that, you know, people have been asking, not only because of automation and computers and AI and so forth, but, you know, we've been asking that question for a long time, and we still haven't figured that out. Anyway, so, but to keep those three things, I try to keep those three things in tangent: race, religion, class.
Mm-hmm. Well, given those concerns, if you will, or parameters, how do you look at the current political situation relative to our people here in this country? You know, what concerns you right now, and what gives you optimism, particularly as you look at it from those three perspectives: race, class, and religion?
Well, I have some hope. I always try to keep, I like Cornel West and others when you talk about hope. I think, and Dr. King and so forth, when we talk about it, I think hope is always important. I think nihilism is not the way to go. I think the idea that there's really nothing that we can do about our situation, I think that's a bunch of BS. I think activism and focused activism with some sort of strategy behind it, and hopefully a strategy that will lead to socialism behind it, is what we do. Right now, I'm focusing on legislation in New Jersey that was just passed last January, calling for setting up of a HR 40 type legislation in New Jersey, specifically for New Jersey. And it's called the Black Legislative Agenda, that calls for a reparations task force to be set up along the lines of the Conyers bill. And it definitely parallels that. So we're setting up a conference, major conference here in South Jersey on that within the next month. In fact, the middle of next month. And we've got speakers coming in and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of the hope thing. On the other hand, so that's part of it. With respect to the elections, you know, I'm worried, of course, like many are, that we're going to have something. I'm not an alarmist, but I think we ought to focus on this whole thing around or about the possibility of a civil war. And I don't think that that's an outlandish way of thinking at this point. I think that we need to begin, many of us, both above ground and under. I know the underground people have been talking about this for a long time, but the above ground people, we need to get serious about this. And the idea that, well, what happens if Trump loses? That's one thought, but what happens if he wins? You know, and what happens with that? I mean, what happens when if the Democrats are defeated? What does that mean? I mean, you know, we pragmatically, many of us, and I know there's a split. There's always been a split among the nationalists and the radicals over whether we should vote or not. Some of us say, hell no, we should not get involved in the political process whatsoever at all, because it's impure, it's this, that, and the other. And many of us say, on the other hand, no, we need to get involved and at least try to steer the conversation and have something to do with the conversation, and therefore we need to vote. And in the short run, as a reformist sort of effort. But the revolutionary effort is not does not involve voting. The revolutionary effort involves conceptualizing, theorizing, and putting into practice, if at all possible, methods of separation, I think, from America as we know it, and or at least a constitutional change that would allow for some sort of, if not total independence, at least limited political autonomy from America as usual. Because what we're dealing with is a constitution that is basically and has basically been formed around racism and race first, white race first democracy. It's called a race first democracy, a mono democracy, white race, and it's a capitalist democracy. So they we're not going to get out of that just by talking about more and more assimilation, more and more integration, because what that does is we get hung up in the wash, and promises will be made, and empty promises at that, and even the empty promises will not be kept, and we know that over and over and over again. However, during this pandemic and during the Trump years, we're finding that we need to do whatever we can to shore up our people. We cannot just disown the masses of our people and say we're just going to walk away. We're going to do this with a minority, an extreme minority. We want as many people as we can to do the old Black Panther thing, and that is to get out there and to be with the masses, if at all possible.
Well, in the last few minutes, I wanted to go back for a second about what you were talking about in Jersey, doing a type of HR 40 reparations study, I guess, or plan, because it seems to be happening. I believe something on that order is happening here in Pennsylvania, possibly Philly. I think I saw.
Yeah, there is. There's some conversation. Yeah.
And it's happened in somewhere in Cali and in Illinois near Chicago, a couple of places.
Evanston, Illinois.
Evanston.
Yeah, which is right out the Northwestern University, right out Chicago.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. So I'm wanted to get a sense, at least from your perspective and what you want to do in Jersey. What's the vision, or what do you see coming out of that, and how would it relate, or would it relate to a national and comprehensive kind of movement for reparations?
Well, I think the national movement is key. And I mean, I see working on both levels. I just, not one or the other. The national movement is obviously key. And there needs to be the aggressive pushes in the Senate. I think Booker introduced S-1083 in the Senate. And what's her name? Sheila Jackson Lee. And others introduced the HR 40, the Conyers bill, in the House last year. And I think at this point, about 130 people have signed on to HR 40. And 15 to 16 senators have signed on to S-1083 on the national level. So that conversation is coming along. On the other hand, NCOBRA and other organizations, the National Reparations Congress, have been pushing this idea of the same idea of doing something at local level. And of course, Chicago back in the 90s, late 90s, started the process in Chicago City Council in terms of passing some, resolutions and so forth. But it's gotten a little bit deeper. I got with the Evanston, Illinois thing, she's talking about using drug money, any kind of money made from marijuana sales, blah, 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 and using that to help do some funding of reparations. I think all that kind of stuff is very important, because if you can get local people involved in this thing, the national thing, it's kind of, it's national, it's sort of out there. But if you get local people talking about it, both Blacks and so-called allies, I think we got a better shot at it. And it gets them involved in this long discussion of why reparations is important in their local areas. And they get to see and understand more in depth about Black history. Now, where are these two bills going? The national legislation and the state legislation. Well, they're both talking about study bills with recommendations. I think the difference between when we started out back in, I think I started on this in 1992 or something. And you might have started before me. I don't know how long.
I don't think so. No, I didn't really get started till 2000. 99 to 2010.
Well, you were only two years behind me. I started in 97. And so, I started writing about it in 92 in my first book. But in 97, I started getting involved in trying to start a chapter here in Camden, a big Colbert. But the idea of where do we go with this stuff? Well, again, I think that, if we get any reparations at all. Now, and I understand it can come in many forms, okay. So the study bills, they come up with recommendations. And that's going to be chopped down once they come up with recommendations. After a year of study, they're going to be chopped up and scattered about into bits and pieces. And the Senate and the House Republicans and some blue dog Democrats and others will do what they can to chop it up. And so I don't know what will come out of that process, except that we've done something to try to get something forwarded here. I'm hoping that something will come out of it. On the other hand, I would think that we need to keep pushing for reparations as a way to fund in the trillions as a way to fund what the old Republic of New Africa was talking about. What my forebearer Harry Hayward was talking about back in the 1930s.
Mhm.
What the African Blood Brotherhood in Harlem was talking about in 1919,
Mhm.
before Garvey, and all this kind of stuff. We need an African nation because we are a nation, and we need to somehow solidify that, and we need to move away from assimilation because it's taking us really nowhere. And I think after all of these years, I mean, we had the David Walker's Appeal came out in 1830. That's a long time ago. I mean, come on now, and we've gone through, Frederick and others
Mhm.
have said that we go through integration. Okay, so we've done that, and we keep getting, what? We get more middle class black people, a few more, but the masses of black people are left where? In the dirt.
Yes.
And it's like, we keep going around with that. We get Obama, he told, and all of that. That's wonderful. But what about the people? I mean, where do we go with this? And, we keep going around. So let's try something that looks like nationalism, but a nationalism with some rationality behind it. I'm not necessarily saying that we have to go back and be Egypt all over again, blah, 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 because I don't know how that looks. But and I've done a lot of study on it too, and I know you have. And I'm not putting people down. I'm just saying I don't think we need to immigrate, although that's an open question. Many people want to do that.
Mhm.
Right now, going back to Ghana, and Nigeria is opening up too. But going back to Ghana is very popular. I don't put people down for that. That's a good alternative if that's what you want to do. I would be very careful myself, but that's what you want to do. So,
Brother Ziyad, we're going to have to end almost there
okay.
with this idea of Black nationalism. I think we all need to get behind that and come to an understanding of that. But you mentioned your books a couple of times. Why don't you let everybody know what books you've got written and where you can get them?
My books came out during my doctoral dissertations. So I wrote 5 books, and there's 2 of them on the market on Amazon, and one is called the Admiral Family Islamic Communities Strategy for Black Political Autonomy. Okay, and it basically takes off on the Nation of Islam,
Mhm.
and mixes that with what we call the Afro American Sunni nationalists,
Mhm.
mainly out of New York, and in some instances out of Chicago and Cleveland, who for years have been thinking and talking about strategizing around Pan-Africanism.
Mhm.
Okay,
What's the other book? Mhm.
and so the other ones, one is on colonialism. One is on Islam itself and looking at Islam and feminism and so forth. But they're not really on sale. They're part of my dissertation. The one that's on sale is on Amazon, the one I just mentioned.
Okay.
And that was written in 1992. And other than that, I haven't written anything else except a lot of articles and so forth for various news sources. And I've been talking to pundits like yourself, podcasters, and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Hey, but you've been in the struggle, man, and putting forth a whole lot of knowledge, and we've gotten a bunch tonight. So, look, thanks so much. I appreciate it, and we're going to see this on YouTube and elsewhere. So,
Okay.
stay strong.
I'm going to do that, man. You take care.
All right.